Hello, everybody. My name is Susan Liu, and here with me today is Rob Carlin. And we've been partnering together on this wonderful CDD journey with United Airlines. Just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Susan. I've been with United since I graduated from college. It's my first job out of college, and I've really loved being a part of this industry. Rob?
Yeah. I'm Rob Carlin. I'm a senior principal consultant. Been with CA for about 9 years, and I've been working with United Airlines for the last 2 years on their continuous delivery journey.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. All right, I'm going to skip these fun slides and go straight to the agenda. So today we're going to talk a little bit about who we are, both as a release management organization at United and who we are as United Airlines. We're going to talk about the governance strategy for release management and how that carried through to the transformation. We're going to talk about the release transformation itself and how data played a role in moving forward towards the automation strategy. And finally, Rob is going to come in and talk to us about CDD and everything that we've done with CDD. So who are we? How many of you guys have flown United Airlines? Okay, you know we're an airline. In terms of numbers and data, we're a pretty big airline. We are in 339 destinations in the world, 200-something domestic, 112 international. We're in 50 countries, and I think the fact that really impresses people when they wrap their mind around it is we do 4,500 departures a day. So our network is very, very vast. But what that means more than anything is that we are a company of 88,000 employees, serving all of you guys, our 143 million customers. So to those of you who have flown United, thank you so much for being a part of our company. So the team that I'm on is called EQRM, and EQRM is an internal service provider combined with quality and release. Traditionally, the quality side of our team, there's anywhere between 300 to 350 people. The release side is a little bit smaller. There's about 25 people on the release side. And both functions have historically existed at United, but 2 years ago, they made googly eyes across the room and came together as one team. And when those two teams joined forces, it was a very, very strong team. We grew very, very rapidly. On the release side alone, which is what the bulk of this presentation is about, we have doubled the amount of releases we've supported in a year without a lot of growth in people, right? And what that told us is, hey, we have to really relook at the way that we're doing our work. We can't go continuing at the pace that we're doing because our poor release managers, Martha's one of them, started walking around like zombies trying to bring the 90s back. And the 90s just need to stay with the 90s. So we knew we had to rethink the way that we did work, right? And there were two things that really jumped out. One, we had to understand, are we working on the right things, right? We knew we were busy, but we have to understand, is everything that we're working on strategic? And two, we kept on seeing all these other groups do cool DevOps, Agile work, and we knew we had to get on board with the whole release pipeline, right? So historically, the release team had always focused on, getting changes from pre-prod to prod. That was their focus. But the more we thought about it, the more it made sense to really add value by providing a service to the whole entire pipeline, which is when we started hanging out with Rob and his crew over at CA. So for those of you guys who are not familiar with release management is a planning function. And the way that I like to talk about it is it overlaps a lot with change management, right? They have a very shared goal of mitigating risk to production. Release management also overlaps with project delivery. They want to make sure that everything is going according to plan and the plan is right? So whereas change management focuses on, have you thought about all these different things before you move to prod? The project team wants to make sure that the details of your plan are correct, right? We're naming the right servers, we have the right people at the cutover, and the release management kind of brings that together, right? So the big thing that we have to do and focus on is moving left and making sure that we have that discipline all the way across the whole release pipeline. So what do we do? Everything starts with governance. You have to start at the top. You have to go back and think about, are we thinking about this in the right way? So we took a look at our operating model, and when I looked at this, I realized a couple things had to change, right? So I added in box 3, which is a release planning function. We were really good at execution. We were solid at driving those cutovers and putting the plans for prod. But the part that was missing was thinking about, are we doing the right type of releases? Are we building those strategic partnerships and relationships? So we created this function called release planning. The other part that we did is split out release automation from environment management, right? A lot of the time, you can kind of think about it in the same way, but at United, when I started talking to people, I realized that there's a very specific definition for a lot of people for environment management, and that meant managing the QA environment on behalf of another application. So to separate the release automation portion, it gave weight and the right weight that we needed to move our strategy forward. So this was probably the hardest part. Every part of a process, every part of a transformation, Mike talked about this yesterday, you have to figure out what you're doing wrong, right? And so we did a very honest self-assessment, leveraging a model from Gartner. And if you guys want to do a centralized release organization, Gartner has a really great article. And what really came forward from this self-assessment was that this team was so great at following the rules. If there was a rule, they followed it, right? But the things that we were kind of good at were putting together things in Excel spreadsheets. We were very, very manually based. Plans were done in Excel, strategy documentation, everything was done in Word. But what I knew was, long term, this wasn't sustainable, and we needed to move towards a automated solution, right? So the part that we were red and the things that we really needed to focus on were the pieces that related to automation and having something drive some of this for us, right? We needed the metrics, we needed to figure out how to do this outside of paper and Excel world. So the transformation itself, this part is fun. So this is in the operating model earlier, but we created 4 different pillars, okay? So the first pillar is release planning, and that's all about making sure that we're taking on the right type of work, that we are meeting the needs of the people that we're serving, right? So before we were treating all releases in the exact same way with exact same weight, and we didn't think about, does this come first? Does this even need to be done? Can this be bundled, right? Can we tie you into some kind of a release forecast model? So we created a pillar just to understand that. The second part and third part, release coordination and release execution, we were very good at already, right? This is all about putting together the plan and doing the cutovers. This is like the bread and butter for a lot of people. They were very, very familiar with how to do this. Step 4, it's on our roadmap. We are making great headways, but this is definitely where we want to go, and that's release automation, right? So this whole year, it's been, as part of the honest self-assessment, it's been about understanding that, hey, we couldn't just jump right in on this one, right? There were skills, there was a skills gap, there was training needed, there was working a lot with Rob and his team to help us, bridge that learning gap. So that's where we've been a lot of this year, is kind of preparing ourselves for automation. So what were the objectives of the transformation, right? And when you're in the transformation world, this is very, very important, helping people understand what we're doing and why. So from a people perspective, we introduced a offshore team. And to be honest, in the beginning, there was a lot of anxiety around this. But it was the right strategy, right? Because the offshore team their daytime was our off time, where most of the releases happened. And we were able to balance the workload with the offshore team. We created a portfolio release manager role. Marta, raise your hand, is one of our wonderful portfolio managers on our team. And that whole role is there to focus on portfolio and planning. We ensured this skill set alignment, and this is huge. Everyone that we hired on from the beginning of this year to now came in with some kind of DevOps, Agile, release automation, pipeline, some kind of experience where they would, knowledge where they could drive us forward, right, strategically. We knew that, if we kept on hiring the same type of people, then we were gonna be stuck where we were, right? So, and we needed to move forward. And last and not least, it was getting the whole entire team to understand, hey, we are a service provider, there is a value associated to our service, and we need to raise our brand, right? So in the beginning, as a part of growth, people really liked working with us, which is a good thing. But instead of doing always strategic releases, they started asking us to create RFCs or just email communications, right? And that wasn't, the level of service we were providing across the organization was no longer consistent. So I knew the team needed a way to reevaluate what was strategically important and not. From a process standpoint, we tied the roles with the different services. So the release managers, they focused on release planning. The offshore RMs focused on the release execution, which is the NITO cutover activities, and the onshore release managers focused on release coordination, which is the planning aspect of releases. And the reason that we're here is technology is such a huge part of what we're doing, right? So we partner with CA. We have a great supportive team from them. We standardize on the tool set. But more than anything, the part that I'm most grateful for is, you know, they've been fantastic about providing us with the learning opportunities to continue to succeed, right? So I talked a lot about making sure we're doing high value work. So in terms of what is high value work? Well, if we're a planning function, then we need to work on things that are high risk, right? So the characteristics of high risk items are changes that were over an hour, things that had an outage, things that expand across multiple communications or teams, things that involved multiple rounds of communication. New functionality, so the systems of innovation took precedence over systems of records in Gartner speak. And the high risk areas, right? So if a portfolio experienced a recent P1 or P2 or had chronic P3s, those were good candidates. And we started really cutting out work that didn't fit into this model, right? So core support, we might support if it was complex enough. But what really hit hard for a lot of the project team is by each line, by each item that we were supporting, we looked at how we were supporting it, right? And if they weren't utilizing the release services that we had to offer at a 75% level, we started having tough conversation with the management of that team. And we said, hey, there could only be one driver in the car. Do you want us to drive it? Do you want your guys to drive it? We're cool, but here's a service that we provide to the organization. Let us know where you want to go, right? So in terms of what those services are, here is the list. I'm not going to go over each one of them because we're going to talk about it a little bit later. How data played into the transformation. Data was huge, and the first thing we did was to make sure that we were managing the right type of work. So we created a release forecasting model. We started tracking onshore and offshore hours, raising the brand value of release management. We measure the release output, how many releases that we were doing, along with the level of engagement, right? Part of that 75% threshold. How well are we engaged in a release? And in terms of prepping for automation, we made sure that the things that we're tracking were consistent across the applications, right? It couldn't be tracking a couple things here and tracking different things there. But the big part is the next bullet, and that's teaching the team to understand what a good release looked like, right? We knew what a good release looked like for going to prod, but it took a lot of discipline and learning to understand what a good release looked like pre-prod, right? What are some of those considerations you need to have in dev and stage and QA, and using that information to drive the release pipeline. So we leveraged Spotfire. Spotfire, have you guys all worked for Spotfire? Some kind of BI tool? No. So Spotfire worked for us because we had a lot of great data. A lot of it is in Excel, but it was there and it was refreshable. And the beautiful part of Spotfire is it takes about 2 weeks to learn. You know, we went through a 2-week training and we were able to get on board and do basic analytics. There were many reasons why we didn't go with pulling data in directly from the source, but that's where we want to move to. So one of the first dashboards that we came up with was the intake dashboard. Historically, because the team was so heavily focused on the QA side, the release team got left out of just initial estimates, right? So they weren't a part of that initial planning. So what we did is we redefined the intake process to make sure that we're getting the onshore and offshore hours for release managers. We created a release dashboard, so when we talked about that 75% and making sure that we were engaged in a meaningful way, for each release, we defined, whether we were engaged in opening the RFC, we were doing the cutover scripts, the communication, the script review, holding the go, no-go meetings, or running the deployment. And this is the method that we used to make sure that we were doing meaningful work. The release management dashboard, it just gives you a high-level dashboard of, the number of releases we were supporting, for whom, and how often. This dashboard was really good. This dashboard shows the releases by the day of the week, out of the day, how long they last, and how long outages last. So the cool thing about this is it gives you a sense of release discipline. So if you click on an app and you see they're deploying, every Tuesday at 10 o'clock, you knew they had a much better chance of going to automation than another application that was deploying a lot more sporadically.
Yeah.
The release management dashboard, this is one that the release managers will take to the portfolio leads. It shows them, basic status like, how many normals or expedites, the level of risk, if the QA team was involved, and just basic stats. And for our next step, we want to move the process from manual to automated. So we're doing orchestrated releases. We want to make sure that the risk identification is done within the tool itself. Right now, it's done based on priority and likelihood and impact, but it's done in a manual spreadsheet. So we want to move this as much to a tool-driven solution as we can. And we want to enable automated, comprehensive feedback testing. So Rob is going to talk to us about CDD and how CDD fit in.
Right. Thanks, Susan. So in our journey at United Airlines, we initially started off with a pretty highly visible product that you probably have seen before. Those who have visited United.com, right? So we got the big one, right? And we went ahead and we used release automation to be able to go ahead and model the actual deployment of the user interface. This is a 3-tier application consisting of user interface, some API layer, in conjunction with a common services layer that provides a group of web services along with some microservices, and then some back-end systems, which include the global distribution system, as well as a lot of legacy applications. We started with a small piece of the pie, and we used release automation to automate the user interface as it propagated from development through stage, all the way to the QA, pre-prod performance, and all the way to deployment. Very successful, had a lot of excitement and interest, saying, wow, we can really get not only tremendous velocity out of our release cycles, but we're actually generating a greater amount of revenue that the business realized in United.com over the last 2 years. Since then, we've automated the entire pipeline of the application, as well as other applications using release automation. Where we come in with Continuous Delivery Director was not only to be able to go ahead and leverage the work that we've done through the automation layer, and those of you that were in Mary's presentation, she talked before from General Motors, she talked about a deployment pipeline and a kind of a release pipeline, right? And the deployment pipeline is release automation, and on top of that, we have the layer or the manager of managers, which is the Continuous Delivery Director. That really is a product that provides the capability for release management, DevOps leaders, as well as the folks who are really monitoring the overall progress in the operations center, the ability to get visibility into the application from ideation all the way to production. So we realized we had to go ahead and not only leverage the work that we did with release automation for pipeline orchestration, but we also wanted to understand what we were doing with deployment orchestration as well. And this is going to give us the capability to not only understand what are the dependencies, what are the conflicts when we do a release. In other words, what applications are dependent on other release cycles, and how we get identification into those dependencies and conflicts, but also how do we go ahead and really manage our releases a little bit more efficiency and become more agile, right? And that really is what we're doing. That's the first theme. The second theme was let's have something in place that can really help us assess our release risk, right? Let's do, as we increase the velocity and the amount of testing that we're doing at United Airlines across the variety of applications, let's understand, what is the risk of releasing this application from development to QA to production. Let's understand, and get an idea how this is working. So release complexity, conflict avoidance, and the whole idea of being able to grab productivity metrics. Third thing is just getting an idea of where we are. Are we healthy in our release cycles? Are we doing what we needed to do, right? Where are we in terms of our release cadence, in terms of where are the errors within the testing cycles? Continuous delivery is an excellent vehicle for not only orchestrating and identifying the orchestration activities that exist in our process, but also understanding how well are we doing with our testing events, and as well as improving those events as well. So continuous orchestration, continuous testing, as well as continuous improvement, and how we can get better. Fourth is how do we get more mature? We're really starting off our journey here. We've had continuous delivery director has been on a development, like a sandbox server, over the last year, with the release managers getting used to it. Most of our release managers at United are probably like your release managers. They're operating from spreadsheets. So the whole paradigm of getting used to moving from spreadsheets to automated, orchestrated, release cycle a paradigm was really key in terms of moving forward. But really providing the capability and maturation process so our release teams can start moving in more of an agile direction. And finally, the governance aspect. We want to move from really providing a solid platform that really gives us the ability of not only eliminating our manual and scripted processes, but also helping us really build a solid release cadence that we can improve upon from cycle to cycle. Currently, we have about Susan, about 5 applications that are in release automation being used by, and these are very big applications. You have crew applications. These are internal reservation systems. These are systems that do above the wing and below the wing business capabilities. So, and we've got our leadership at United has plans for another 10 or 15 of these as well, and these are all major applications. As we mature and as we go ahead and build these out and monitor these with continuous delivery director, we're going to do a lot more, leveraging of the ecosystem that comes along with these applications. So change management, ServiceNow. United just went ahead and decided to select ServiceNow as their change management vehicle. CDD has a great capability of interoperating with a ServiceNow layer and being able to go ahead and update or manage the actual ticketing process along with ServiceNow, along with a variety of ecosystem tooling as well. And finally, validating and monitoring, being able to automate and validate how well we're doing and where we can be able to do improvement as well. So the governance is really the main directive here. I'm going to turn it back over to Susan to kind of summarize, and then we'll open it up for Q&A.
Okay. So because we're in Mandalay Bay, I am totally going to go here. All right. So one, it starts with the man in the mirror. That's right. Michael Jackson's playing downstairs. So it takes a lot of honest self-assessment. No part of transformation can happen if you're not willing to look at yourself really hard and ask, what can I do better, and what it's going to take to get there, right? And I think Mike echoed those sentiments yesterday. And two, if you're going to ask him to make a change, it better be a measured change. You need numbers. You can't just say we're going to make a change and just go, right? We need to make sure we're on track and doing the right things. And three, if you do want to go from manual to automated, then here at United Airlines, we highly suggest that you make that change. So if I didn't ruin that song for you guys forever, and you have any questions, before you go, there's a few must-see demos. One is automating your DevOps ecosystems. That's in Theater 3. Continuous delivery for developers is also in Theater 3, and Modern Software Factory in the Cloud is in Theater 3 also. Okay? Any questions?